Hello and welcome to Slide Into Sports live on 103.1 FM radio on WVLP. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, and today lots to talk about with the college football playoff, obviously, and this plays kind of right into my wheelhouse because I love to look at college football and college basketball in a situational way because there are so many factors that you can take in order to, look at and evaluate a game, not just based off statistics or just simply off eye test, but combination of both, as well as, other factors like the environment and injuries and, coaching changes, coaching changes for college football, there's been a ton of those. So, yeah, with that being said, let's get into the college football playoff rankings because those got released on Sunday at noon Eastern time, 11 Central, and for the most part, it's okay. There is a lot of controversy, though, surrounding 9 through 12, so we're going to get right into that. But first, Indiana is number one in the country. Yes, you heard that right, Indiana. The Hoosiers are your number one team in the nation on the AP poll and on the college football playoff poll. The first time in school history that Indiana is at the top of the rankings in college football. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that this would have ever happened? But here we are. We are all witnessing history right now. And if my voice isn't making this completely obvious, I thoroughly enjoyed Indiana beating Ohio State. I just had the most amazing time watching that game. Speaking of Ohio State, they're number 2. Georgia, they stay at 3. Texas Tech stays at 4. And then your misfits of non-conference championship game teams, I guess, bandit of 4 teams, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma in that order. They stay in their spots from Tuesday. No real surprise there. The only surprise would have been is if Alabama won the SEC championship, then we probably would have seen those teams moving around a little bit. So there's that. Miami, they come in at 10, Notre Dame 11, BYU 12, Texas 13, Vanderbilt 14, Utah 15, USC 16, Arizona 17, Michigan 18, Virginia 19, Tulane 20, Houston 21, Georgia Tech 22, Iowa 23, James Madison at 24, and North Texas rounding out the top 25. So I said earlier that numbers 9 through 12 are stirring up controversy in college football, and I'm going to tell you exactly why it is stirring up controversy. And it's pretty simple. So you look at these 4 teams and the circumstances and situations that they were each put in going into conference championship weekend. BYU at number 12, they competed in a conference championship game. Alabama at 9, competed in a conference championship game. 2 very similar situations because you look at it and Alabama, they lost to Georgia by 21 points. It felt like more because Georgia was controlling that game, but it was 21 points between the two teams, and Texas Tech BYU 27 points. So a slight edge in, I guess, dominance goes to Texas Tech in beating BYU by more points than Georgia beat Alabama, I guess. But that's besides the point. The point that I'm making here is that BYU was 11-1 going into that conference championship game, and they were on the outside looking in. Alabama was 10-2 going into their conference championship game, and they were on the inside looking out. Now, clearly, both teams, like I said, they, had similar results in their conference championship game. But Alabama, they didn't have two of their starting running backs. And I mean, even just looking at the stat sheet, it showed, because Alabama had -3 rushing yards. That's right, -3 rushing yards in a conference championship game against a team that you would beat. Now, I bring this up simply because you guys remember 2023, right? Where Florida State, undefeated ACC champions going into the year. And this was the last year of the 4-team playoff. And Alabama upsets Georgia in the SEC championship. And they have one loss. But because Florida State had their starting quarterback injured, and they were down to, I believe, their third string because their second string was also injured, last I checked, that was enough to take a team out of the playoffs. And Florida State won their conference championship game. Well, it's interesting how even when the shoe is now on the other foot, one team does not get punished, while the other one does. And you look at BYU, and BYU, they have a better record than Alabama. They have a better record than Alabama. Their only loss being to Texas Tech. BYU beat two teams that are ranked in the top 25. So did Alabama. But, BYU, they have the better record. They had the better record. And you know what? And they still decide, BYU, you're not good enough to participate in our invitational. I'm not even going to call it a playoff right now. I'm going to call it an invitational because, well, that's what it might as well be, because the committee doesn't have a consistent set of rules and standards to get in. They just kind of, make it up as they go along. Now, BYU Texas Tech, let's look at the team stats there. You know what? At least BYU put up 63 rushing yards. They were averaging about the same yards per play that Alabama was, 3.3 or 3.4 yards to what was Alabama's again? Alabama's was 3.8. So like 0.4 yards difference in yards per play. And total yards, again, like you look at the similarities, BYU had 200 and Alabama, well, they had 209. They had 209. And they were playing pretty similar opponents rank-wise. I mean, Alabama's playing number 3. BYU was playing number 4. BYU was ranked lower going into their game. Alabama was ranked higher. So, I don't know. It seems a little fishy to me on that end. But it's like, if you're going to not punish one team for competing in their conference championship, you should at least, and I mean, they basically rewarded Alabama for competing in their conference championship. You got to reward the other one. You can't just be like, oh, now we're going to put Miami in, even though Miami didn't compete in a conference title. Yes, they did beat Notre Dame, but Notre Dame and Miami did not compete in conference titles. So, here is the way I'm looking at this, okay? Clearly, they took these 4 teams and they judged them by different criteria, right? You've got Miami, Notre Dame. They've played common opponents. They played head-to-head. They have similar strength of schedule, strength of record, and Miami goes on top of Notre Dame. And you know what? That logic kind of makes sense. I mean, it does make sense. However, having BYU below Notre Dame and Miami when neither of them played in a conference championship game tells me that, again, like I said before, different criteria. And you know what? It's because BYU is in the Big 12. They hate the Big 12. They hate anyone that is not SEC or even Big 10. It's kind of ridiculous, but That's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So here's what I would have done if I was in the committee. If I was running the College Football Playoff Committee, the almighty CFP committee, which currently has 0 ounce of my respect at this point. But what I would do is there's 2 things that I would have done. Either one of these things would have set some kind of precedent, but it would have been consistent, and teams would know what to do for next year, and it would be fair. So here's the 2 things that I would do, okay? First, here's option A, right? Let's say I'm on the committee, and my committee decides we value going to your conference championship game. You know, Alabama, BYU, they're competing in Power 4 conference championship games. We don't want to punish them for that. They're playing an extra game that other teams aren't. That's unfair if they, for some reason do bad. And that's a data point that the other teams aren't going to have a chance to have because they didn't make it there. So what I would have done in this scenario was I would have had BYU at 9. I would have put Alabama at 10. I would have put Miami at 11. And I would have put Notre Dame at 12. That way, when you look at it, it's fair. You set the precedent that we want to take teams that participated in their conference championship games, especially at the Power 4 level. I mean, BYU, this would not have been a difficult thing to do because BYU was in the bubble. They were in the bubble. They could have easily just moved BYU on up. Now, I have BYU above Alabama because of the record, because BYU would be 11-2, or is 11-2. Alabama's 10-3. I thought BYU should have been above Alabama to begin with. But, that's just me. I'm not the actual committee, even though maybe I should be. Wow, that sounds like I have a huge ego, but, I'm just kind of spitballing here. Now, scenario 2. This one kind of goes, well, no, it just does. It goes in the exact opposite direction of what scenario A was, or scenario 1. Alabama and BYU, yes, they did make it to their conference championship games, but they both, they crapped themselves. They crapped themselves in that game. Alabama down their 2 best running backs in that game. BYU, quarterback was banged up in the middle of the game, didn't look good in the second half, got blown out, right? Blown out by 27 points. Both of these teams got blown out by 20-plus points in their conference title games. So, what do? Well, if we put Miami in and not Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame has been above Miami this whole time, people are going to see that we're punishing Notre Dame. And they might look at it as, well, we want to push Notre Dame into joining a conference. When, in my mind, I actually think college football is, in a way, kind of going in the opposite direction. It's not quite there yet, but I think it's heading in that direction. Because you look at teams like Texas complaining about their schedule, right? What is the easiest way to control your schedule? Notre Dame already does it. They're independent. They can schedule and make contracts with whoever they want. They have a 7-game contract with the ACC. They play their rivals that would technically be out of conference. You look at USC, you look at Army, you look at Navy. And they make a crap ton of money because they don't have to split it with the conferences. They have an exclusive deal with NBC where they take all of Notre Dame's home games. So yeah, I think teams are going to start leaving their conferences and start going independent. Now, this might be a really hot take that you're hearing right now, but trust me, it does make sense. I mean, I could see a team like Texas Tech going independent. With all the money they already have, they're starting to grow. They're on top of the Big 12 right now. They could easily leave. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma left when they were at the top of the Big 12. I mean, they went to the SEC, but they left when they were at the top. Texas Tech could have even more money than we could possibly fathom. Can't calculate the numbers at this time, but it would be a number so big. I don't even know what would happen. Maybe Trump would cry or something. I don't know. But yeah, it would be a very, very large number. But yeah, if you put Miami at 9, Notre Dame 10, and either Alabama at 11 or BYU at 11 or 12, but Miami and Notre Dame would get in. Miami would have the head-to-head, but Notre Dame would still be in the playoffs. So they wouldn't feel like they'd be getting slighted. It wouldn't look like that my committee would be pressuring Notre Dame to join a conference. And it would look like we would be punishing teams for playing like crap in their conference title games. But again, I go back to Bama specifically here because their 2 starting running backs were not playing in this game. Which means, going back to 2023 FSU, that Bama team is not the same Bama team that played against Georgia and beat them in Athens back in October, back in September. So, if that's the case for Florida State in 2023, why is it not the case for Alabama? I mean, committee, make it make sense for me, please. Because so far, you've been doing a pretty terrible job at it. Anyway, so yeah, those are the 2 scenarios that I would have for Alabama, Miami, Notre Dame, and BYU. And I think, it would seem the most fair because right now people are looking at the rankings and they're screaming bias. They're screaming, they're crying bias. And granted, if Notre Dame got in over Miami, the same cries would be had. If Notre Dame got in over Alabama, the same cries would be had. People are going to cry bias either way. But if you have a set criteria that is clear and everyone can understand and make sense of it, then there won't be as much complaining as much as there would be understanding of what is set in place, of what the committee wants, of how to get into the college football playoff. Wow. Imagine that. Being clear with people makes them happy. Anyway, let's move on to the bracket here because I think this is pretty much what we saw last week, except now we know who the Group of 5 conference champion or champions, I should say, are. So, obviously, Indiana is at the 1 seed. They will be playing in the Rose Bowl against either Alabama or Oklahoma, whoever wins that game. Then you've got Ohio State at the 2 seed, right? They're playing in the Cotton Bowl. They're playing in the Cotton Bowl, and they would be playing either Miami or Texas A&M. Then Georgia at number 3, they play in the Sugar Bowl against either Tulane or Ole Miss. Then finally, Texas Tech would play in the Orange Bowl as the number 4 seed against either Oregon or James Madison. Now, this one I find very intriguing because the final is at the Orange Bowl. The final is in Miami. So I don't know, it's just weird to me that there's a quarterfinal game and then there's like a break. Then there's the semifinal games, which are the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. And then it goes to the semifinals and finals where it's back to the Orange Bowl. I don't know. It's just a little strange, but yeah, it is what it is, I suppose. Oh, man. Anyway, so I guess just looking at these paths for these teams, I think, and this might sound biased, but I think Indiana has the best path, or at least playing either the 9 or the 8 seed, I think will play very well into Indiana's hands. And here's why. Indiana is a very well-balanced team on both sides of the ball. It's really hard to find a weakness that this team has. Now, Alabama and Oklahoma both have weaknesses. They are not complete. Alabama, if Jam Miller and their starting running backs aren't back, I don't even know if they get past Oklahoma, to be quite honest. But if they somehow do, they're going to have to match up against Indiana, who just beat Ohio State, not only in, the Big Ten championship, which, I mean, speaking of, we'll talk more about that later because it was an amazing performance by Indiana, even though it was a 3-point game, but just a great performance by the Hoosiers. Alabama struggles covering the run on defense, and they struggle at running the ball. And now they struggle at running the ball even more without their starting running backs. Oklahoma, great on defense, great at pass defense, great at rush defense. They're just great at defense. But offense, that offense can be super stagnant. It takes a lot for that offense to get going. That didn't used to be the case when John Mateer was 100% healthy. In fact, at one point when John Mateer was 100% healthy, I thought Oklahoma had an amazing shot at winning the SEC title. But, then Mateer broke his thumb, and they lost to Texas, and it just, went a little bit downhill from there. But, yeah, I think Indiana going up against either Alabama or Oklahoma, I think it fares really well for Indiana. I think it does. Now, I think probably the toughest path is Ohio State's, because they're going up against either Miami, who has something to prove. They got a second chance from the committee to perform in this playoff as the sole ACC team that stands in the playoffs. They're going to Texas A&M, and honestly, that game will be quite interesting because Miami, I think, kind of like Indiana, they're great on the line of scrimmage. I think the only problem, though, is I think the reason why Miami is not as good as Indiana is mainly because of quarterback play, because Carson Beck, there are times where he cannot take care of the ball to save his life. I wish I was joking, but I mean, you look at the Louisville game, 4 picks. You look at the SMU game, and he's, again, throwing picks in costly situations in overtime. And it's and they're going up against a Texas A&M team who also, at times, struggles to take care of the ball. And they are explosive. Both teams are very explosive. But both teams are also very turnover prone. Very turnover prone. And that's what Texas A&M's downfall was in their last game of the year against Texas. They just turned the ball over one too many times. Now, I think Ohio State will probably beat either one of them. I think they have a better shot at Texas A&M than Miami, because I think Miami's been playing a lot better football recently than Texas A&M has. I think Texas A&M has also skated by on the fact that they've played the bottom half of the SEC conference, which, people were dogging on Indiana last year for playing the bottom half of the Big Ten and said that Indiana didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. And they had the same record as Texas A&M, and they didn't go to the conference title like Texas A&M. Yet Texas A&M got to be the 7 seed, and Indiana was the 10 seed. So, yeah, it's just, amazing how things work out that way sometimes. But, yeah, I think Ohio State, that defense would do a great job at containing Marcel Reed. They would not let him run around that much. I mean, you didn't really see Fernando Mendoza running around too much against Ohio State. I mean, he ran a couple of times, but he didn't run that much. But if it comes down to it, like, if Marcel Reed has to use his legs, I don't know if he's going to be able to against this Ohio State team, especially on the line of, like, that defensive line that Ohio State has. I don't know. I don't think Texas A&M would get it done against Ohio State. Miami, they are balanced on the offensive side of the ball. They've got a decent shot at, I think they have a better shot, actually, than Texas A&M at beating Ohio State. Miami is also great on the line of scrimmage, and I think between the two teams, I think Miami, that defensive line, I think if they pressure Julian Sayin like Indiana did in the Big Ten title, then Miami could maybe get the upset, because they're pretty good. Like, they're kind of like, I think they're close to Indiana. Miami also just doesn't get a lot of credit, because being in the ACC and also dropping 2 games they shouldn't have. But Miami is built kind of like Indiana. You've got a older, experienced quarterback. You have a elite defensive line, elite offensive line. You've got great weapons, both running backs and wide receivers. And you've got excellent pass coverage. They're built very similar. They're very, very similar. I think Indiana is also better coached than Miami. I think that's another thing that Indiana has the advantage of. And I think Fernando Mendoza is the better quarterback than Carson Beck. Not being biased, because obviously I am an IU fan, but I promise I am not being biased here. But anyway, I think Miami, because they are built like Indiana, if Carson Beck is able to take care of the ball, if he has a insane Heisman-like game, and he's had those before, he has, but if he wants to beat Ohio State, if Miami wants to beat Ohio State, they're going to have to take care of the ball, and they're going to have to apply pressure to Julian Sayin, because, I mean, you look at the Big Ten game, Ohio State and Julian Sayin got sacked, what was it, 6 times the entire season. Do you know how many times that he got sacked in the Big Ten championship game? 5. He got sacked 5 times. That's almost the exact same amount of times that he got pressured or got sacked the entire regular season. Now, I've been saying that Indiana's defense is extremely underrated. This just straight up proves it. This just straight up proves my point. But if Miami's able to apply pressure to Julian, I think they've got a shot. I think they've got a shot at winning. I think Georgia's path isn't necessarily too bad. I think they're probably going to go up against Ole Miss. They've played Ole Miss before, but this time they're not going to be coached by Lane Kiffin, so I'm not really sure what this team is going to look like. I mean, they're going to have a more defensive-minded person behind the wheel. Lane Kiffin is not a very defensive-minded person, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Ole Miss also will have their offensive coordinator calling offensive plays, so there is that for Ole Miss. So their offense, I think, will look generally the same. I think it'll look generally the same. They'll at least have their playbook on offense. I think defense might be stronger. I think their defense might be stronger because their defensive coordinator is going to be even more at the helm of that defense. But, I mean, the way Georgia looks against Bama, it's hard for me to pick Ole Miss against Georgia. I mean, I'd love to pick Ole Miss against Georgia. I would. And I think it would be amazing if Ole Miss somehow got past Georgia. It would be like the team of destiny. You know, they lost their head coach. Now they got something to prove. But Georgia, they looked really good in that Alabama, or, you know, in comparison to Alabama. They didn't really have to look amazing against Alabama because Alabama, their offense became extremely one-dimensional in that game. But, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a close one again. I think it might be a close one again. Either way, I think Georgia wins. But even if it's not a close one, I like Georgia a lot in this matchup. And then finally, Texas Tech. I think this one, it's probably going to be Oregon versus Texas Tech. I mean, no hate to James Madison, no hate to JMU, but I just don't see them beating Oregon. I think Oregon, like on the line of scrimmage, they're great. Oregon also has a great run game that I frankly don't think gets talked about enough. But they've got a great run game. They've got some weapons. Dante Moore can throw the ball. It's just a matter of him not choking in big moments. But I mean, we've seen Oregon go up against teams like JMU before in a situation similar to this. I mean, not this exact Oregon team, but I remember when Oregon was just outside of the playoffs, it was either 2022 or 2023, they went up against Boise State and they just kicked the crap out of them in one of the New Year's Six Bowls. So I think Oregon, they are set up to make a run to the semifinals to rematch against Indiana. Do they get past Texas Tech? Honestly, I don't think so. I think Oregon's good. I do, but Texas Tech has just, especially on defense, they've just looked phenomenal. Like, they're just so explosive on both sides of the ball. They're built on the line of scrimmage. They've got a ton of playmakers. I mean, one of their linebackers is in the Heisman conversation, Jacob Rodriguez. I mean, well, I'll talk about him later, but man, like Texas Tech, they are for real. Like, I don't care what any doubters say, especially Paul Feinbaum, which I probably have the most one-sided beef on planet Earth with him, but you know what? It's I keep it light and it's fun. So yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, I think that Texas Tech Oregon game will be an amazing game. It will be an amazing game. All right, so before I start talking about the Big Ten Conference Championship game and the Heisman Trophy, because that is coming up this coming weekend, and Notre Dame opting out of a bowl game, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact.com. impact-coaching.com. All right, so Big Ten Championship concluded in Indianapolis, and Indiana claimed their first outright Big Ten conference title since, I think, 1941 or something. Like something really far away. But anyway, it was just wow. I mean, that's pretty much all. That's pretty much all I can say. I have never really gotten emotional after the outcome of a football game in my life, and well, I'm proud to say that this is the first time that that's ever happened. I wouldn't want it for any other game, unless, of course, the national title. But wow, just amazing game. Fernando Mendoza, he put up great performance. He put up 15 for 23, 222 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Pretty solid performance. Julian Sayin also didn't have a bad performance either. He was 21 for 29, 3 for 258, also a touchdown and interception. And the one key stat here, I think, that separates Julian Sayin from Fernando. Fernando only had -3 rushing yards when he got sacked, and Julian Sayin, he had -29 rushing yards. It was, I mean, the pressure was on for Ohio State. And, I mean, you look at the total yardage, and it's pretty even yards per play, pretty even. Indiana had 6 yards per play. Ohio State had 5.8. But the key here with this game is that Indiana was able to establish their run game. They were able to dominate on the ground. And that's how Fernando was able to get the ball to his guys. That's how he was able to get it to Surratt. That's how he was able to get it to Becker. Like, you need to establish a good run game in order to open up the pass game. Like, that's how Indiana plays their football games. It's always complementary. That's how Cignetti likes to do. Like, that's how he runs his game plan. He always establishes the run game first and then, starts doing the pass plays. And Indiana, as the game goes on, they get more and more explosive. And that's what we saw in the second half in the Big Ten Championship. Indiana was starting to throw explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. They were getting downfield when it mattered most. They were able to move the sticks when it mattered. They were 6 for 13 on third down. They were also 1 for 1 on fourth down efficiency. Ohio State did dominate the time of possession, though. And they had the same amount of plays as Indiana. And this stat, actually, the total play stat, is actually something that normally doesn't happen. Because normally, Ohio State, when they play teams, when they win their games, normally they have less plays than their opponent. They just control the game. Like, you look at, no, they'll have more plays, but, like, they like to control the game and they like to have time of possession. Like, they try to just beat you down and then just hold on to the ball. When they played, like, Washington, for example, 62 total plays versus Washington's 53. Ohio State had about 4 more minutes of time of possession with the football. Now, let's look at a team like Illinois. Right? Illinois is a team that both Indiana and Ohio State played. Indiana obviously killed Illinois. It was not very close. But this is one where Ohio State, this time they had less total plays, but they dominated the time of possession. Ohio State, 64 plays. Illinois, 71. But Ohio State, 33 minutes of time of possession. Illinois, almost 27. They were at 26 minutes, 50 seconds. So they just held on to the ball. And that's what they do. And they ended up beating Illinois 34-16. So that's like Indiana being able to have around the same time of possession. Indiana having 29 minutes, 47 seconds of time of possession. Ohio State with 30 minutes, 13 seconds, only really 30 seconds difference. So they held on to the ball for about the same amount of time. The penalties, though, that's kind of what held Indiana back a little bit, because Indiana had 5 penalties for 49 yards. Ohio State only had 2 for 20. They were pretty disciplined out there, but just wasn't enough. They just weren't as efficient on third down. They didn't get it on fourth down, and yeah, like the sacks killed them also. Like I said, 5 sacks on Julian Sayin. It was not good. Like Indiana applied that pressure. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the Heisman Trophy. So the ceremony is this weekend. The Big Ten Championship was a game that people were looking at as a possible battle for the Heisman between 2 of the top candidates, Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza. Diego Pavia is also another name that is being thrown around in the Heisman conversation. There's also Jeremiyah Love, of course, from Notre Dame, Jeremiah Smith, Jacob Rodriguez, Gunnar Stockton, and Ty Simpson. Although Gunnar Stockton and Ty Simpson, I think, have a very outside shot of making it to New York. I don't think they will, but Jacob Rodriguez, I think that's a very interesting candidate. I mean, I think it's interesting that he has, better odds than Gunnar Stockton and Ty Simpson, considering that Jacob Rodriguez is a linebacker. But yeah, then you've got, of course, Jeremiah Smith. He's the only wide receiver right now with the highest odds. He is the highest odds of a wide receiver by far. Then you've got Jeremiyah Love, plus 5,500. He has the best odds out of any position player that's not a quarterback. So, and he is the 4th best odds. Then you've got Julian Sayin in 3rd, Diego Pavia in 2nd, and Fernando Mendoza in 3rd. All 3 very close. Fernando Mendoza with plus 155, Diego Pavia with plus 185, and Julian Sayin with plus 200. So those 3 are neck and neck. I think those 3 you are for sure going to see in New York, without a doubt. Now, are we going to see Jeremiyah Love in New York? I mean, something that I have been looking at is running backs with the Heisman Trophy in the year with a 5. So this year, right, is 2025. Okay? And now let's look at this for a second, okay? So the last year that it ended in a 5, that would be 2015. Who won the Heisman? Derrick Henry, running back from Alabama. All right, but I can keep going further. It's 1 year. Maybe it's a coincidence. Reggie Bush, USC, running back, 2005. Oh, but maybe it just happened twice. Maybe it's got to be a coincidence, right? Wrong. Eddie George also won the Heisman Trophy. Running back. He was also a running back. So, but just wait. We can keep going. Bo Jackson, 1985, running back. Then go back even further. Archie Griffin, running back, 1975. No. But there's no way that it goes any further than that. No, it can't. It can't go any further. Oh, but it can. But it can. And you know what? Let's just keep going, right? So, Archie Griffin, Ohio State, running back. We can keep going even further. Mike Garrett, USC, running back. Even further. 1955, Howard Cassidy, Ohio State. running back. The last time that it was the year that ended in a 5 where there was no running back that won the Heisman, it was 1945. So this whole running back winning it in the year with the ending in a 5 started in 1955. So the person that won in 1945 was Doc Blanchard from Army, a fullback. So maybe we see a linebacker win it. Maybe we do, because if a fullback can win it, maybe a linebacker can too, right? Maybe it switches up the tradition this time. But I think that is one of the things that is largely keeping Jeremiyah Love in the race, but he also has just been putting up absolutely monster stats. So it's hard to keep him out of the conversation. I'll say that much. But yeah, I think it's weird a little bit just, looking at it, that Pavia is just kind of vaulting into the front runner position just because, he didn't do anything this Saturday. He didn't do anything for conference championship weekend. He beat Tennessee in commanding fashion, but he sat at home. How did his odds jump the way that they did? It just, I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I think the Heisman race will be one that will be very interesting, to say the least. I think it'll be very interesting to see who makes it to New York. The schedule, we're gonna see people making it in for. Well, we're gonna see today. It's Monday, right? So normally, what happens is candidates are announced on Monday. There's normally there's four people that make it to New York today at I think, if I'm not mistaken, 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Hold on. That might be Eastern. I'm going to double check. But it'll be Monday. So Monday, December 1st, Heisman ballots were distributed. Monday, December 8th, the Heisman voting deadline has been reached. So, all the ballots have to be handed in Monday, December 8th, today. Today, we're also going to see who the Heisman finalists are. Now, if you're listening on Tuesday, you already know who the Heisman finalists are. So, yay. But, we're going to find out on Monday. And then on Saturday, December 13th, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Heisman announcement ceremony will begin on ESPN. Now, last year we saw a plethora of players that made it into the Heisman Trophy finalist ceremony in New York. Those players were Dylan Gabriel, quarterback from Oregon, Travis Hunter, wide receiver and center back from Colorado, Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State, and Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami, Florida. This time, I think what we're probably going to see is we're probably going to see either 3 quarterbacks and a running back, or 2 quarterbacks, a running back, and a linebacker. And of course, in those 2 scenarios, I'm saying that it's either going to be Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin, Diego Pavia, and Jeremiyah Love, or it's going to be Jeremiyah Love, Jacob Rodriguez, Fernando Mendoza, and Julian Sayin and or Diego Pavia. I'm kind of using Julian Sayin and Diego Pavia interchangeably because they're odds were closer together than Fernando's. So, yeah, that's pretty much who I think will probably be inside of the top 4 and make it to New York for the ceremony. I mean, it's not very like bold prediction or anything. I'm just kind of, basing it off of what I've seen, what I've heard from, the media and people on social media, like on TikTok, Instagram, because, I mean, if there's one thing that is not on a stat sheet for being a Heisman candidate is the hype, right? You can't really calculate or you can't really measure hype on paper. It just it comes and it goes. And it gets however big. And, I mean, right now I will say, I think if you're talking about hype, I think the 3 candidates that probably have the most hype are Fernando Mendoza, Jacob Rodriguez, and Jeremiyah Love. I think those 3 have the most amount of hype. Stat-wise, I think like a lot of those guys have like great stats, so it's hard to separate them based off of stats. But I mean, it's a ceremony, so they're gonna pick people that people like. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and I think even before the ceremony even like begins, like before we even see a winner, there's going to be controversy because someone will probably be left out that, you didn't think should have maybe been let out or left out because, I mean, there's a decent amount of people that could make a case at some point this year to be the Heisman. So, yeah, I think it should be a very interesting Heisman race, to say the least. I mean, something I did want to talk to you guys about, at least stat-wise, was Jacob Rodriguez. Okay, so this dude has very interesting stats, and the reason I say this is because he has, even though he plays just the one position, he only plays linebacker, but Texas Tech, I mean, because they've been so dominant in their games, they've been putting Rodriguez in on the offensive side of the ball as like a running back or even a quarterback. Like, he's thrown the ball, he's run with the ball. Like, he's done a lot with the football. So, like, he has 60 solo sacks on the year, 114 like total tackles. Like, he has 54 assisted tackles. What's another one? Like, passes defended, he has 6 of those. He's got like 1 sack, which it's kind of hard to believe, but I mean, considering some of the other stats. But then he's got 7 forced fumbles though, which that's huge. 4 interceptions and 41 yards on defense. But scoring, he's got 2 rushing touchdowns, which, I mean, come on, that's kind of crazy. I mean, what Texas Tech has been doing is they've been putting Rodriguez behind the line of scrimmage and basically using him to do the tush push. Yeah, and he's got 1 returning touchdown and 1 interception touchdown. Or no, 3 interception touchdowns. Excuse me. That was my mistake. But he has had 2 carries, 3 yards, averaged 1.5 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, like, yeah, like, he gets a lot of attention running the ball. And passing, he's attempted once and has 1 interception on passing. So, He does have a negative 200 passing rating, which I guess maybe is not very good. But, I mean, the fact that he's passing the ball, he's rushing the ball, like, he's scoring on offense and defense. I mean, that's pretty insane for a linebacker. All right, so last thing I'm going to talk about is Notre Dame opting out of playing in their playoff game not playoff bowl, but their bowl game due to not being in the playoffs. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this. I don't think they should have done this, but I mean, if for one thing, it's definitely bad PR. Not a lot of people are really liking this move by Notre Dame. And, I mean, people are now basically saying that Notre Dame took their ball and went home, which, I mean, that's what it looks like. But, I mean, I can see where they're coming from. I mean, they feel slighted. Like, Notre Dame feels like they have been slighted. So, not entirely surprised that they're like, you know what? Screw you guys. I'm going home. So, yeah. Basically, this came as an announcement on Twitter when Notre Dame posted on Twitter a little letter that said, as a team, we've decided to withdraw our name from consideration for a bowl game following the 2025 season. We appreciate all the support from our families and fans, and we're hoping to bring the 12th national title South Bend in 2026. And it was signed by the football team. So it's making me think that they had a meeting about this after the watch party that they had for the college football playoff to see if they got in. And probably just in that moment, they were like, you know what? We're not playing in the bowl game. And that, I assume, was probably a decision reached by the coaches and players, and the athletic director was spoken to about it, I assume, probably by, Marcus Freeman. Marcus was probably like, hey, we don't want to play in the bowl game. Is that okay? Because this whole college football playoff thing is ridiculous. And I'm sure the athletic director was like, yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think it's ridiculous, and we're not playing in a bowl game. So I think it just was a collective agreement within the moment that they weren't going to play a bowl game. And again, like I said, I don't agree with that decision, but I guess in a way Notre Dame's going to be able to look ahead to next year. They're going to be able to pull people from the transfer portal, but are people going to want to go to a team that is going to opt out of bowl games for not making it into the playoffs? I mean, it might hurt them if they're trying to bring people in, because people might not like doing that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Notre Dame and the recruiting, because if there's one thing that Notre Dame is going to have an advantage on, is they're not going to have to worry about playing an additional game. They're going to be able to look at the transfer portal and find pieces that they need to make their team even more complete and even better, because they have a young quarterback in CJ Carr that they're going to have next year. So, I mean, Notre Dame has a pretty bright future ahead of them. And with that, that is all that there is time for today. I mean, we're going to talk more college basketball next week because there's not really any college football this weekend. There's going to be more next weekend. So next week, we're going to talk a lot of college basketball because it's starting to get into the in-conference play with Indiana playing Minnesota earlier last week. Also, Indiana is going to be playing Penn State on Tuesday. Illinois is going to be playing Ohio State on Tuesday as well. So we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of conference opponent versus conference opponent in college basketball. So we're going to see how these teams stack up against each other. And if you missed last week's episode, or if you want to stay up to date Follow, or if you want to re-listen to the episode, head over to Patreon, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Slide out.